CRVC TV episode number 5. Today we are talking about air conditioning. So last week we had weight distribution hitches, and we have a few questions from last week that we're going to go over to begin with Greg while we wait for some people to jump on in and start asking some questions about air conditioning. Anything to do with ducting air conditioning, just standard reverse cycle air conditioning, shoot them through when you can. I will just pop it round to Greg. We'll get started on our last week's questions. How you going, Greg?
Hi all, welcome back.
Okay, so we had from last week Andrew, and he wanted to know, hi, what do you do in the case where you have a Ford Ranger and they say you shouldn't run a hitch?
Okay, look, in that case what I would suggest is certainly contact the vehicle manufacturer. Sometimes those specifics around the factory tow bar rather than being the vehicle itself, particularly with Nissan, they had a problem with their factory bars, but it didn't affect, say, the Heyman Reese tow bars on the Nissan vehicles. So again, as I suggest, contact Ford, check what the actual requirements are, and if there is any problems with the vehicle itself. They are a recommended device, so as I said, you may find it's just if you happen to have a Ford factory tow bar that they're not compatible to a weight distribution system, in which case it would be simply an easy enough solution to change the tow bar to an aftermarket style bar which is suitable for that style of hitch.
Good, thanks mate. Hope that helps, Andrew. Gary does a dual axle lessen sway compared to a single axle?
Look, for sure. The tandem axle vans are generally more stable on the road. All of them have a slight amount of toe on their assemblies, which means that the undercarriage wants to bite down on the road, and obviously the stability of 4 tyres in contact with the road as against 2 generally makes them far more stable. And obviously in the event of a flat tyre or a blowout, again you've got still inflated equipment on that side of the van to help support the load.
Okay, and we have one from Lex. If I have a ball weight of 250 kg, what effect does this have on the rear axle weight?
Okay, so that ball weight transfers to the rear axle. So your ball weight is carried on the rear axle of the vehicle unless you're using a weight distributing hitch, which then will proportionally shift that load and spread it across the vehicle.
Oh my god, a couple more. Danny, if I have heavy rear spring suspension, do I need a weight distribution hitch?
Look, for sure. Again, the weight distributing hitch does not overcome the support of the suspension. So the idea of the weight distributing hitch is to rebalance the vehicle and make sure that it keeps that positive weight on the steer and braking wheels on the front end of the vehicle. So whether you have heavy duty springs, airbags, they don't overcome the requirements for a weight distributing hitch. Certainly heavy duty coils or airbags will level the bodywork, but they won't put that weight that the Caravan has put on your rear axle back out onto the front axle of the vehicle, which is where you want it for steering and braking.
Okay, we've got a few people joining in, a few people sharing. Thanks for that, guys. We're going to jump into some air conditioning. Currently our lovely trauma eventer we forgot to switch on today, so we're nice and hot in here, but that's all right. We'll get on to some questions that we had prepared earlier, just some standard questions that we get through the repair centre and online quite often. How often should you replace your ducting for a ducted air conditioner?
Well, there's no requirement to replace the ducting. Obviously it's on serviceable condition. There's no real reason the duct should deteriorate. If the system itself is kept clean and the filter's clean, then obviously you'll limit the amount of dust flowing through the system. And that would be the only reason you really normally need to replace ducting, other than items in a cupboard that may wear the ducting. Otherwise it should service the life of the air conditioner.
And what about your filters? Not so much replacing them, but how often do you think we should clean them?
Definitely, that is very dependent on the environment. So obviously a good recommendation is probably once every few months to give the filters a good clean. The cleaner the filters, the less work the air conditioner has to do. So not only does it make the load on the air conditioner better, it'll help the cooling process of the air conditioner, it'll handle more air through it with less blockages. If you're in dusty conditions, you may need to do that far more frequently. So what I'd say is just design a little regime when you're doing the weekly cleaning, have an inspection of the filters, and if they need a good clean, give them a clean.
Oh, thanks, mate. Okay, any questions you guys have got in regards to different air conditioning pop through? A very common question that we get through is household air conditioning. Can you use a household air conditioner with a Caravan?
Look, the basic answer to that in reality is no. You do see people use domestic air conditioners on their caravans. Now, if you've got a caravan that is a permanent sited caravan or a caravan that has very limited use, you may get away with a domestic aircon. The main difference between the aircons, obviously your RV air conditioners are designed for high frequency, often vibrations. Your domestic units are designed to be fixed either in a window or planted solidly on the ground, and they don't tolerate the vibrations you get through road transiting. So you will find those units, if you're in a normal touring caravan, will fall apart very quickly, and it's really one of the main differences in cost. It's why the RV air conditioners are so expensive in comparison, is they're mounted to tolerate all of that rough vibration and treatment and handle that and keep working for years on end. As I said, the domestic units, whilst they're very attractive in price, you'll find that they'll fail fairly quickly through that vibration abuse that they'll suffer on your RV.
Thanks for that, good answer. Okay, Herbert's back from last week. Thanks, Herb. One of my mates has a pop-top caravan who is looking to purchase an air conditioner. What sort of things should he be considering before purchasing? Great question.
Okay, so the real considerations, firstly, are the size of your pop-top. I mean, they do vary from small vans to quite large vans these days. I mean, you get 18-foot pop-tops these days, which is quite a large area. And obviously the weight of that air conditioner unit. So you're wanting to look at one of the units that, if you're in a bigger pop-top, has good output, but is still light in weight. And there's a few good ones on the market for that. The Truma Aventa is obviously a high capacity unit with reasonable weightage. Some of the big solid rooftop air cons can get quite heavy, and they're not really designed for your pop-top. Also speak to the manufacturer whether they've pre-installed a air conditioning frame to support that aircon, because even the weight of the light rooftop air cons in a pop-top, if they haven't got a frame, will need one fitted. You can do it externally aftermarket and they'll support that fine, but you can't just sit the air conditioner on the roof because it will damage the roof structure.
Okay. What else we got? So, what's the best air conditioner, rooftop style or built-in?
Look, we generally recommend the rooftop air cons as one of the better units. They're a fully sealed, self-contained unit, so you haven't got any pipe work or joints, so to speak, of that are prone to leak. Now, normally in your air conditioning system, one of the biggest problems you find is that pipe work leaks the refrigerant gas at the joints. Now, in a fully sealed rooftop unit, you don't have that problem. The second advantage of the rooftop units is you want a convective flow inside your van. So obviously hot air rises, cold air sinks. So if you can get that cold air as high as you can on the roof, sinking down through the van, you'll get the maximum cooling effect. And those split systems and your ducted systems can often struggle to get the same altitude as your rooftop, where that cold air is just falling down through the roof and you get a good convective flow, so a good cool right throughout the van. You haven't got cold spots down low and hot spots up the top.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, keep the questions coming in, guys. We sell a lot of these air conditioners online and we're getting heaps of questions lately, so we'll keep going with them if you've got nothing else for us. Are solar panels enough to generate power? This is another very, very common question that we get through.
Look, unfortunately, generally not. There are some products in development at the moment, but generally the current draw on most air conditioners is around about 2 to 2.5 kilowatts, which is 2,500 watts of energy. It's a very large draw, and most 12-volt equipment, which is what your solar panels will produce, are not able to produce that sort of energy. You'd need massive batteries for storage, and the effective usage life would be an hour to 2 hours, even out of a very big battery bank. It would drain it very, very quickly. So, as I said, as a general rule, you can only really power air conditioning from 240 volt via either a generator or your mains supply connected to the van.
Steve has jumped in. Thanks, Steve. Can I fit a Caravan rooftop aircon myself?
Look, certainly, if you're reasonably handy, you can do most of the mechanics. Obviously, it is a 240 volt connection, so you will need a licensed electrician to complete that job. But if you're, a very skilled individual, you should not have a great deal of problem actually fitting the physical unit itself. Most of them come with detailed fitting instructions, but as I said, the final connection is a 240 volt connection, and therefore you will need a licensed electrician to fit that for you.
Okay, hope that helps, Steve. What else have we got? How can we make our aircon more efficient on those really hot days?
Okay, so that's an excellent question. Obviously, the cooler the van, the better the air conditioning is going to work. So on very hot days, obviously try and keep window blinds closed, curtains drawn, roof hatch blinds closed, and limit the transiting in and out of the van as much as possible. That will help the air conditioner condition that air that's inside the van to its best potential.
Okay. Stephen Reeves, what size generator do you recommend to run an AC? Great question, Stephen. Very common one.
Look, and again, as far as your generator goes, most of the aircons will require a 2.5 kilowatt generator. If you're lucky enough in the Honda range, you can get away with one of the 2 kVA units. They're quite successful at running air conditioning. They're probably that'll be the smallest generator you'd be able to buy that will effectively power your air conditioning unit. In most brands, you'll be, as I said, around that 2.5 kVA.
Okay. And what about yourself, Greg? What do you run in your van?
So air conditioning, I run a Truma Aventa, and generator Honda 2. And as I said, I find it will power that unit very effectively. They're very economic, and they certainly were one of the most quiet power plants on the market. If you're not accessing 240, and said most of my travel is unfortunately free camping, so we don't have access to mains 240 volts, so we run the generator on very, very hot summer days if we can.
Any tips of keeping those generators quiet, Greg?
There are a few tips. One of the best tips that I picked up from one of our clients is obviously position the generator as far away as possible on a long lead. Being mindful, the longer the lead, the greater the current drop on that generator, so they do lose a little bit of efficiency if you get a long way away. But to get an extension exhaust pipe for the generator, dig a small trench, pop that exhaust into the trench. If you've got an old potato sack over the top of it that's been dampened with water, and some dirt around the top to support it, and you'll find it'll cut the noise down by at least half, if not 2/3 of the output without that being done. So in the Honda's case, you'll barely be able to hear the generator operate.
Great, good tip. I love my air conditioning, but I don't like generators, so it's a miss for me. One more has come through from Howard. Why do air conditioners come with either a 360mm or a 400 opening? What's the difference?
The only difference is the pass-through height. So a lot of roof hatches on your vans are standard in those dimensions, and that's why they supply them. So a lot of your standard roof hatches are 360 by 360, so a great deal of the aircons on the market will fit that straight drop-in application, and a lot of them are uniform, so you can swap from make and model and still fit the same hole. Things like the Truma Aventa, they use that slightly larger hole, being the 400 by 400, but there's no real specifics other than that. It's only for the air handler inside to obviously be able to feed your cold air in and take your hot air out and process that.
Okay, thanks Greg, hope that helped Howard. Another one in from Steve. How does the heating work on RV aircons?
Okay, there's two main ways that the RV air conditioners do. So the old-fashioned way is what they call heat pump. So it's an electric element that the air blows across, obviously heating that air as it goes across. They were not particularly efficient, as you needed to slow the air down over that electric element for it to get hot enough to get a really good heating effect inside the van. Quite often what we found was those elements would then trip out from overheating because you were slowing the air down to a point where the element was overheating to get sufficient warmth out of it. More modern units are a full recycle unit, so they run their compressors in a reverse cycle, and they're quite efficient in their heating. So as I said, last year we did the Great Ocean Road midwinter, and I used our gas heater only on one day, and you know, those we went through Canberra, where we were sort of -5 degrees with ice outside on the ground, water frozen, and the Trima Eventer kept up with that the whole time. So most of the time I was walking around inside the van in shorts and a t-shirt. So they were a very efficient heater in that regard.
Cool. Well, it feels like a heater in here, soon as we forgot to turn the aircon on early, so we might wrap it up today, guys, unless there's anything else you want to pop through. Next week we are going on to Caravan washing machines, so keep the questions coming through this week. We'll answer anything else you've got to do with air conditioning before we start off on washing machines next week. Anything you want to add for the end, Greg?
Just have a great week, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks, mate. See you guys.